My son didn't invite me to his wedding, but what I did next made sure he'd never forget I was there. One silent move and the entire celebration unfolded in a building I now owned, and that was just the beginning. The wedding invitation never came. I sat in my leather armchair, the same one where I'd read bedtime stories to my son Daniel 30 years ago, staring at my phone screen in disbelief. There it was, posted on social media for the entire world to see. My only child getting married in a beautiful ceremony at the Grandview Manor Estate, surrounded by what looked like 200 guests. I wasn't one of them. The photos showed Daniel in a perfect black tuxedo, beaming as he kissed his bride Sarah beneath an archway of white roses. The caption read, "Best day of our lives. So grateful for all the love and support from our family and friends." Family and friends, but not his father. My name is Robert Manning, and at 68 years old I thought I understood disappointment. I'd built a successful construction company from nothing, survived my wife's death from cancer 5 years ago, and weathered the storm of watching my relationship with my son slowly crumble over the past decade. But this was something else entirely. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Not just the wedding, but the deliberate secrecy. The careful way Daniel had avoided mentioning any specific dates during our increasingly rare phone calls. The way Sarah would suddenly become busy whenever I suggested meeting for dinner. They'd planned this entire celebration while systematically excluding me from their lives. As I scrolled through more photos, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was my brother-in-law, James, raising a toast at what looked like the reception dinner. There was my late wife's sister, Margaret, wiping away happy tears. There were neighbors I'd known for 20 years, colleagues from my old company, even Daniel's college roommate who I'd helped find his first job. Everyone had been invited except me. The Grandview Manor Estate. I'd driven past it countless times over the years, admiring its sprawling grounds and elegant Victorian architecture. It was the kind of place where the wealthy held their most important celebrations, with manicured gardens, crystal chandeliers, and a price tag that reflected its exclusivity. Daniel had clearly spared no expense for his perfect wedding. The same Daniel who'd claimed he was too busy with work to visit his father for the past 6 months. Too stressed with wedding planning to return phone calls. Too overwhelmed with life to maintain any meaningful relationship with the man who'd raised him alone after his mother died. I set my phone aside and walked to the window overlooking the city skyline. My penthouse apartment was comfortable, even luxurious by most standards, but it felt like a mausoleum tonight. The silence was deafening. When had everything gone so wrong? I thought back to Daniel's childhood. After his mother died when he was 15, it had been just the two of us against the world. I'd done everything I could to be both father and mother, attending every soccer game, helping with homework, teaching him to drive, walking him through his first heartbreak. I'd worked 18-hour days to build my business while still making time for what mattered most, being his dad. When he went to college, I was so proud. When he graduated and started his career in marketing, I celebrated every promotion. When he met Sarah 3 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms, even though something about her cool politeness had always made me uncomfortable. But somewhere along the way, I'd become the enemy. It started small. Canceled dinner plans, shorter phone calls, holidays that became obligatory rather than joyful. Daniel began treating me like a burden rather than family, and Sarah seemed to encourage the distance. Every conversation felt like an interrogation. Every gesture of love was met with suspicion or annoyance. I'd tried everything. I'd given them space when they said I was too involved. I'd tried to be more involved when they accused me of being distant. I'd offered financial help, emotional support, advice when asked, silence when demanded. Nothing was ever enough. And now this, the ultimate rejection. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment my heart leaped, thinking it might be Daniel with an explanation, an apology, something. Instead, it was my housekeeper, Maria, checking in as she did every few days since my wife passed. "Mr. Manning, I saw the photos online. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Even Maria, who cleaned my house twice a week, had been invited to view Daniel's wedding photos before I knew they existed. The humiliation was complete. I typed back, I'm fine. Thank you for checking on me. But I wasn't fine. I was hurt, angry, and most dangerously, I was wealthy enough to do something about it. I'd spent 40 years building Manning Construction into one of the most successful development companies in the region. I owned properties throughout the city, had connections in every level of government and business, and had enough liquid assets to buy almost anything I wanted, including the Grandview Manor estate. The idea hit me like lightning. Why should I sit here feeling sorry for myself when I could take action? If Daniel wanted to treat me like I didn't exist, maybe it was time to remind him exactly who he was dealing with. I opened my laptop and began researching the estate. The Grandview Manor had been family-owned for 3 generations, but recent financial troubles had put it on the market quietly. The asking price was substantial, $12 million, but well within my means. More importantly, the current owners were motivated sellers facing bankruptcy if they couldn't find a buyer within the next 60 days. I could make this happen. But as I stared at the property listing, I felt a moment of doubt. Was this too extreme? Was I letting my hurt feelings drive me towards something I'd regret? Then I remembered the look on Daniel's face in those wedding photos. Pure joy, surrounded by everyone who mattered to him. Everyone except the man who'd sacrificed everything to raise him. My doubt evaporated. I picked up my phone and called my attorney, William Drake, despite the late hour. William had been handling my legal affairs for over 20 years and he was used to my unconventional requests. Robert, it's nearly midnight. Is everything all right? William, I need you to draft a purchase offer for a property. Tonight. Tonight? Robert, what's going on? I told him about the wedding, about the photos, about the systematic exclusion from my son's life. William listened without interruption, which I appreciated. He'd known Daniel since he was a child and understood the complexity of our relationship. Robert, he said carefully when I finished, I understand you're hurt, but buying a $12 million estate out of spite might not be the best. It's not spite, William, it's business. The property is undervalued. The location is prime for development and the current owners need a quick sale. This is actually a solid investment. And the fact that your son just held his wedding there is irrelevant to the business decision. William was quiet for a long moment. You're lying to yourself, Robert, but you're also my client. If you're determined to do this, I'll help you do it right. But I want you to think carefully about the consequences. This isn't just about money. This is about your relationship with your son. What relationship? I asked. He made it clear I don't have a son anymore. The purchase offer was submitted at 9 a.m. the next morning. $12 million, cash, with a closing date 30 days out and no contingencies. It was an offer no financially desperate seller could refuse. By noon, I owned the Grandview Manor estate. The speed of the transaction was breathtaking, even by my standards. The previous owners, the Ashford family, were so relieved to avoid bankruptcy that they agreed to everything, including allowing me to take possession immediately while the paperwork was finalized. I drove out to the estate that afternoon, pulling through the wrought iron gates that Daniel had walked through as a groom just days before. The property was even more impressive up close. 40 acres of perfectly maintained grounds, a main mansion with 22 rooms, guest cottages, formal gardens, and the grand ballroom where my son had danced with his new wife. The estate manager, a distinguished woman in her 50s named Catherine Reynolds, met me at the front entrance. Mr. Manning, welcome to Grandview Manor. The Ashford family asked me to show you around and discuss the transition. I hope you'll consider retaining our staff. We've been managing events here for over 15 years. As we toured the property, Catherine explained the business model. The estate hosted approximately 50 high-end events per year. Weddings, corporate retreats, charity galas, and private parties. The revenue was substantial, but the overhead costs and recent economic pressures had pushed the Ashfords to their financial breaking point. What was the most recent event? I asked, as we entered the grand ballroom. Catherine's expression grew slightly uncomfortable. A wedding reception last Saturday. Absolutely beautiful ceremony. The couple seemed so happy. I nodded as if this was merely casual information. I'm sure they were. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers hung from a coffered ceiling. Tall windows offered views of the manicured gardens, and the hardwood floors gleamed under the afternoon sunlight. I could picture Daniel and Sarah having their first dance right here, surrounded by all the people who loved them, all the people except me. Mr. Manning, Catherine continued, I should mention that we have several events scheduled for the coming months. The Ashfords honored all existing contracts, but as the new owner you'll need to decide whether to continue our event hosting business or change the property's use. What events? She consulted her tablet. We have a corporate retreat next week, 2 weddings in September, a charity gala in October, and the annual Harvest Festival that we've hosted for the past decade. The community really looks forward to that one. An idea began forming in my mind, a way to transform my purchase from a simple real estate acquisition into something more meaningful. Catherine, tell me about your staff. How many people work here? During events we employ about 30 people. Full-time we have 8 staff members, myself, 2 groundskeepers, a head chef, 2 housekeepers, a maintenance supervisor and an assistant event coordinator. And how were they treated by the previous owners? Catherine hesitated. The Ashfords were under a lot of financial pressure. Some staff hadn't received raises in 3 years. Benefits were cut. Several experienced people left for better opportunities. Perfect. Catherine, I want you to arrange a meeting with the entire staff tomorrow morning. I have some changes I'd like to implement. That evening I sat in the estate's library, surrounded by leather-bound books and the faint scent of old money. I was reviewing the staff files Catherine had provided when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Daniel's number. For a moment I considered not answering. Let him leave a voicemail. Let him wonder why his father wasn't immediately available. But curiosity won. Hello, Daniel. Dad. His voice was strained. We need to talk. Do we? That's interesting. You haven't seemed interested in talking for quite some time. Dad, I know you're angry about the wedding. Angry? I interrupted. Daniel, I'm not angry. I'm heartbroken. There's a difference. Silence on the other end. Then, it wasn't personal, Dad. We wanted a small, intimate ceremony. 200 people isn't small, Daniel. And everyone was intimate except your father. Dad, tell me something, son. When did I become someone you were ashamed of? When did I go from being your father to being an embarrassment you needed to hide from your new wife and her family? That's not fair. What's not fair is finding out about my only child's wedding on social media. What's not fair is being systematically excluded from your life while everyone else gets to celebrate your happiness. I could hear Daniel breathing heavily. Dad, I heard you bought the estate. There it was, the real reason for the call. I did. It's a beautiful property. Great investment potential. Don't play games with me, Dad. Why did you buy the place where we held our wedding? Why didn't you invite me to your wedding? Another long silence. Sarah thought it would be less stressful without family drama. The words hit me like a physical blow. Family drama. I was family drama. I see. And you agreed with her? Dad, you can be intense. Sarah's family is very traditional, very conservative. You thought your father would embarrass you. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. I ended the call. The next morning I gathered the Grandview Manor staff in the main dining room. 8 people sat around the polished mahogany table, looking uncertain about their future under new ownership. Catherine had clearly briefed them on the situation, but their expressions ranged from hopeful to worried. Good morning, everyone. I'm Robert Manning, your new employer. I want to start by saying that I've reviewed your files and I'm impressed by your dedication to this property despite some challenging circumstances. I saw a few people exchange glances. They'd been expecting layoffs, budget cuts, maybe even closure of the event business. I have some immediate changes to announce. First, everyone in this room is receiving a 20% salary increase effective immediately. Second, I'm restoring full health benefits for all employees and their families. Third, I'm establishing a profit-sharing program so that when the estate does well, you do well. The room was completely silent. Catherine looked like she might cry, But there's more. I'm also adding $5,000 to each of your bank accounts as a signing bonus for staying with Grandview Manor under new management. Maria Gonzalez, one of the housekeepers, raised her hand tentatively. Mr. Manning, why are you doing this? It was a fair question. These people didn't know me, didn't know about Daniel, didn't understand that their loyalty and dedication to their work represented something I'd lost in my own family, because I believe that people who work hard and treat others with respect deserve to be valued. The previous owners were good people who fell on hard times. That's not your fault and you shouldn't suffer for it. James Patterson, the head groundskeeper, spoke up. Sir, we heard that your son had his wedding here last weekend. We're sorry if there were any complications. I looked around the table at these 8 people who had helped create the perfect day for my son's wedding. They had arranged flowers, prepared food, cleaned every surface, and ensured that Daniel and Sarah's celebration was flawless. They had done their jobs with professionalism and pride, probably never knowing that the groom's father hadn't even been invited. There were no complications, I said. I'm sure you provided excellent service, as always. In fact, I'd like to hear about the event. What made it special? Catherine smiled. It was really beautiful, Mr. Manning. The couple seemed so in love and their families were lovely. The bride's parents were very involved in the planning, and they were so grateful for everything we did to make the day perfect. The bride's parents, of course they were involved. They had probably walked Sarah down the aisle, given speeches, shared in all the moments that should have included me. I'm glad it was a success. You should all be proud of your work. Thomas Chen, the chef, leaned forward. Mr. Manning, if you don't mind me asking, what are your plans for the estate? Are you planning to continue hosting events? This was the question I'd been waiting for. I'm planning to expand our event hosting significantly, but I want to do it differently than it's been done before. I want Grandview Manor to become known for something unique. What kind of unique? Catherine asked. I want us to specialize in celebrating people who have been overlooked, undervalued, or forgotten. I want to host events for families who need healing, for communities that need bringing together, for individuals who deserve recognition but haven't received it. The staff looked puzzled, which was understandable. What I was describing wasn't a typical business model for a luxury event venue. Let me give you an example. Next month, instead of our scheduled corporate retreat, I want to host a celebration for every employee who has worked at Grandview Manor over the past 5 years. Current staff, former staff, seasonal workers, everyone. I want to honor their service with a dinner that rivals any wedding reception we've ever hosted. Maria's eyes widened. You want to throw a party for us? I want to throw a party for everyone who makes this place special. The people who work behind the scenes, who create magic for others but rarely get to experience it themselves. Catherine was taking notes furiously. Miss Manning, that's an incredible gesture, but the cost is my concern, not yours. Money isn't the issue here. Purpose is. Over the next hour we discussed the logistics of transforming Grandview Manor's mission. Instead of simply renting space to wealthy clients, we would actively seek out opportunities to celebrate overlooked communities, retirement parties for public servants, appreciation dinners for teachers and first responders, wedding receptions for couples who couldn't otherwise afford such venues. But Mr. Manning, said Jennifer Walsh, the assistant event coordinator, how will this be financially sustainable? If we're hosting events for people who can't pay premium prices, we'll cross-subsidize. For every full-price corporate event or wealthy client wedding, we'll host a community celebration at reduced cost or for free. The estate can afford it and the community deserves it. As the meeting concluded, I could see the staff processing this dramatic shift in their workplace culture. They had gone from working for owners who couldn't afford to pay them properly to working for someone who was voluntarily expanding their mission beyond profitability. I have one more announcement, I said as people began gathering their things. This Saturday evening, I want all of you and your families to join me for dinner in the main dining room. Not as employees but as my guests. We'll use the good china, open the best wine and celebrate the beginning of our partnership. After everyone left, I remained in the dining room, looking out at the gardens where Daniel had posed for wedding photos just days earlier. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mr. Manning, this is Sarah, Daniel's wife. We need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m.? I'll come to the estate. Interesting. The new Mrs. Manning wanted a face-to-face conversation. I texted back, I'll be here. The next afternoon, I watched from the library window as a white BMW pulled through the estate gates. Sarah stepped out wearing a crisp business suit and an expression that suggested this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. She looked around the property with what appeared to be a mixture of familiarity and discomfort. I met her at the front door. Sarah, welcome to my home. Mr. Manning, she didn't smile. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I led her to the library, offering coffee or tea, which she declined. She sat on the edge of one of the leather chairs, clearly not planning to stay long. I'll get straight to the point, she said. This has to stop. I'm sorry, buying this place, it's manipulative and petty, and it's putting Daniel in an impossible position. I leaned back in my chair studying my daughter-in-law. She was attractive, intelligent, and clearly used to getting her way. She was also young enough to mistake directness for strength. Sarah, I bought a piece of real estate. How does that put anyone in an impossible position? You know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to punish us for the wedding, and you're using your money as a weapon. If I wanted to punish you, I would have done something punishing. I bought a property that I can afford, in a location I find appealing, for reasons that are entirely my own. The fact that you held your wedding here is simply coincidence. Sarah's composure slipped slightly. That's bullshit and you know it. Language, Sarah. We're in a library. Her cheeks flushed. Don't patronize me. I know what this is about. You're angry that we didn't invite you to the wedding, so you're trying to contaminate our memories of the place. Contaminate. Interesting word choice. Sarah, can I ask you something? Why wasn't I invited to my son's wedding? She looked away. It was complicated. Complicated how? Your relationship with Daniel has been strained for years. We thought having you there might create tension. What kind of tension? The kind where you make everything about yourself. The words hung in the air between us. Finally, the truth. I see. And this is your assessment or Daniel's? It's both of ours. Based on what evidence? Sarah stood up, clearly agitated. Based on years of watching you try to control Daniel's life. Based on the way you interrogate his choices, question his decisions, and make him feel guilty for not living up to your expectations. Examples. When he chose marketing over engineering, you spent 6 months trying to talk him out of it. When he bought his condo, you criticized his choice of neighborhood. When we got engaged, you immediately started planning our wedding without being asked. I felt like I'd been slapped. I offered suggestions. I wanted to help. You wanted to control. There's a difference. And so you decided the solution was to exclude me entirely. We decided the solution was to have one day that was about us, not about managing your feelings. The honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. Sarah, do you love my son? The question seemed to surprise her. Of course I do. And do you want him to be happy? Yes. Then you should know that excluding his father from the most important day of his life didn't make him happy. It broke his heart. He's just too proud to admit it. Sarah's anger seemed to deflate slightly. He hasn't said anything to me about feeling bad. He wouldn't. Daniel learned a long time ago to hide his feelings when they might inconvenience other people. It's not a healthy trait, but it's how he survives relationships. She sat back down, looking less certain than when she'd arrived. Mr. Manning, what do you want from us? It was a fair question, and one I hadn't fully answered for myself. I want what every parent wants, Sarah. I want to be part of my child's life. I want to know that the person I raised, loved, and sacrificed for doesn't see me as an embarrassment or a burden. And buying this place accomplishes that. How? It gives me something to focus on other than the fact that my son doesn't want me in his life. It gives me a purpose beyond being the interfering father you both clearly think I am. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Daniel is miserable, she said finally. About what? About you not being at the wedding. About the way we handled it. About this whole situation. Then why doesn't he call me? Because he's ashamed. He knows we hurt you and he doesn't know how to fix it without admitting that I was wrong. It was the first time she'd acknowledged any fault in the situation. Sarah, I'm not asking you to throw yourself on a sword. I'm asking you to help me understand how we got here and how we move forward. She sighed. I was protecting Daniel from what I saw as your need to control everything. But maybe I was also protecting myself from having to share him with someone who knew him before I did. There it was. The real issue. Sarah, I raised Daniel alone for half his life. I know him very well, but that doesn't mean I know him better than you do, or that I love him more than you do. It just means I love him differently. I'm not good at sharing, she admitted. I'm an only child, I'm used to being the center of attention, and when Daniel and I got together, I liked being the most important person in his life. You're his wife. You are the most important person in his life, but that doesn't mean there's no room for anyone else. We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, I could see the groundskeeping staff working on the gardens, probably preparing for Saturday's dinner. Mr. Manning, Sarah said, if I could do the wedding over, I would invite you. Not because Daniel pressured me, but because it was wrong to exclude you. Thank you for saying that. What happens now? Now we figure out how to be a family. All three of us. And the estate. I smiled. The estate becomes something that brings people together instead of keeping them apart. That Saturday evening, the Grandview Manor dining room was transformed. Catherine and her team had outdone themselves, creating an elegant dinner party that rivaled any event we'd ever hosted. The long mahogany table was set with crystal glasses, fine china and candles that cast a warm glow over the room. The staff arrived with their families, dressed in their best clothes and clearly overwhelmed by the experience. Children who usually played in small apartments were running through rooms with 20-foot ceilings. Spouses who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet were being served wine that cost more than their weekly groceries. I stood at the head of the table, looking at the faces of people who had worked tirelessly to create magical experiences for others but rarely experienced magic themselves. Before we eat this incredible meal that Thomas has prepared, I want to say something. This estate has hosted hundreds of celebrations over the years. Weddings, anniversaries, corporate parties, charity galas. But tonight is different. Tonight we're not working. We're not serving. We're celebrating ourselves and each other. Maria's teenage daughter raised her hand. Mr. Manning, why are you doing this for us? I thought about how to answer. How do you explain to a 16-year-old that sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt the people they love most? How do you tell her that generosity toward others can be a way of apologizing for your own failures? Because I've learned recently that family isn't just about blood relation. Family is about people who show up for each other, who work together, who create something beautiful as a team. You are all family to me now, and family deserves to be celebrated. As dinner progressed, something wonderful happened. The formal atmosphere relaxed into genuine warmth. Stories were shared, laughter filled the room, and children played hide-and-seek in the grand hallways, while their parents enjoyed conversation and excellent wine. Catherine's husband, a mechanic, found himself deep in conversation with Thomas about the similarities between troubleshooting car engines and perfecting complex recipes. Maria's son, a college student studying business, peppered me with questions about entrepreneurship and construction. Jennifer's elderly mother held court at one end of the table, regaling everyone with stories from her career as a school principal. This was what family dinner should feel like. Inclusive, warm, and focused on the joy of being together rather than the stress of performing for each other. Around 10 p.m. as the evening was winding down, my phone buzzed with a call from Daniel. I excused myself and stepped into the library. Hi, Dad. Hello, Daniel. I was calling to apologize. About the wedding. About everything. I could hear emotion in his voice. Go on. Sarah told me about your conversation. She said she was wrong to ask me to exclude you and I was wrong to agree. Dad, I'm so sorry. Daniel, apologies are nice, but I need to know that things are going to change. I can't keep being treated like I'm some kind of problem that needs to be managed. I know, and they will change. We want to try again. What does that mean? It means Sarah and I would like to take you to dinner next week. Somewhere nice, somewhere we can talk like adults and figure out how to be a family. Through the library window I could see my staff and their families saying goodbyes in the front courtyard. Children were being bundled into cars, adults were exchanging hugs, and everyone looked genuinely happy. Daniel, I'd like that. But I have a condition. Okay, I want you and Sarah to join me for Sunday dinner here at the estate once a month. Nothing formal, nothing stressful. Just the three of us getting to know each other better. Dad, that sounds perfect. After we hung up, I returned to the dining room where Catherine was supervising the cleanup. Mr. Manning, this was incredible. I've never seen the staff so happy. Maria actually cried when she saw the table setting. It was my pleasure, Catherine. This is what the estate should be used for. Sir, I have to ask. The conversation you had with that young woman yesterday, the one who was clearly upset about something, was that related to tonight? I smiled. In a way, she reminded me that sometimes we hurt people we love without meaning to. And sometimes the best way to make amends is to start treating other people the way we should have been treating them all along. 3 months later, Grandview Manor had become something unique in the luxury event industry. We still hosted high-end weddings and corporate events, but we'd also celebrated a retirement party for a beloved school janitor, a 50th anniversary for a couple who'd never been able to afford a proper wedding reception, and a graduation party for the first person in her family to attend college. The local media had picked up on our community-focused approach, and we'd received inquiries from organizations across the region wanting to partner with us on events that celebrated everyday heroes and overlooked contributions. More importantly, my monthly dinners with Daniel and Sarah had become something we all looked forward to. The conversations were easier, the laughter more genuine, and the sense of family more real than it had been in years. One Sunday evening in October, as we sat in the library after dinner, Sarah made an announcement that surprised us both. "I'm pregnant." Daniel beamed. "We wanted to tell you in person, Dad. You're going to be a grandfather." I felt tears in my eyes. "That's wonderful news. How are you feeling, Sarah?" "Terrified and excited in equal measure." "When is the baby due?" "May," Daniel said. We were hoping you might want to be involved. You know, the way grandfathers are supposed to be involved." "Daniel, there's nothing I want more." As we talked about baby names and nursery plans and all the joyful details of preparing for a new life, I realized that my impulsive purchase of Grandview Manor had accomplished something I never could have planned. It had forced all of us to confront the ways we'd been hurting each other, and it had given us a place to practice being the family we wanted to become. 6 months later, I held my granddaughter Emma for the first time in the same library where I'd once sat alone, feeling excluded and forgotten. Sarah and Daniel had asked me to be in the delivery room, a privilege I'd never expected to receive. As I looked down at Emma's perfect face, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The wedding invitation that never came had led to a purchase that changed everything. The estate that had once represented my exclusion had become the place where our family healed. "Dad," Daniel said, "Sarah and I have been talking. We want to ask you something." "What's that?" "We want to have Emma's christening here at the estate, with the whole family, the staff, everyone who's become important to us. We want it to be a celebration of all the people who love her." I smiled, looking around the room that had become the heart of our new family traditions. "I think that's a perfect idea, but I have one condition." "What's that?" "I want to invite Jake, the young man from the gas station who helped me when I was stranded, and Mrs. Chen from the bank who helped me with the estate purchase, and Dr. Tinez, my therapist who helped me understand that healing takes time." Daniel looked puzzled. "Dad, who are these people?" "They're the family I discovered while I was waiting for you to come back to me. They're proof that sometimes the people who show up for us aren't the people we expected." Sarah bounced Emma gently. "That sounds like a very Grandview Manor kind of celebration." "Exactly." As autumn turned to winter, Grandview Manor continued to evolve. We hosted a Thanksgiving dinner for families who had nowhere else to go, a Christmas party for children in foster care, and a New Year's Eve celebration for seniors from local retirement communities. Each event reinforced my growing understanding that exclusion breeds exclusion, but inclusion creates more inclusion. The more we opened our doors to overlooked communities, the more our own family circle expanded in strength. 1 year after the wedding that broke my heart, I received a letter from Daniel that put everything in perspective. "Dad, I've been thinking about the day we didn't invite you to our wedding. At the time, I thought I was choosing peace over conflict, simplicity over complication. What I was actually choosing was fear over love. I was afraid that including you would mean risking the perfect day Sarah and I had planned. I was afraid of family dynamics, emotional complications, and the messiness that comes with real relationships. But what I learned is that perfection without love isn't perfect at all. Our wedding was beautiful, but it wasn't complete without you there. The estate you bought has become something none of us expected. It's not just a business or a property. It's a statement about what family can be when we choose inclusion over exclusion, generosity over protection, and love over fear. Emma's christening will be different. It will include everyone who matters to us, everyone who has shown up for our family, everyone who has helped us learn what love looks like in action. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for turning your hurt into something healing. Thank you for showing us that the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's grace." 2 years later, I stood in the grand ballroom of Grandview Manor, watching my granddaughter Emma take her first steps across the same floor where her parents had danced at their wedding. The room was filled with family, Daniel and Sarah of course, but also Catherine and Thomas and Maria and all the staff who had become our chosen family. The estate had won several awards for community service and had been featured in magazines as a model for socially conscious business practices. But more importantly, it had become a place where love was celebrated in all its forms: romantic love, family love, community love, and the love that comes from showing up for people who need someone to believe in them. My phone rang and I saw it was Helen, my sister, calling from Phoenix. "Robert, you need to see the news," she said without preamble. "Turn on Channel 7. I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news station. A reporter was standing in front of what looked like a construction site, but something was wrong. The buildings in the background looked familiar. The Manning construction scandal continues to unfold as federal investigators reveal the extent of fraudulent practices that may date back over a decade. Sources close to the investigation say that Robert Manning, founder of the now-defunct company, may have used client funds to purchase luxury properties, including the recent acquisition of the Grandview Manor estate. My blood went cold. The room seemed to spin around me. "Dad?" Daniel appeared at my side. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. On the screen, they were showing photos of me, photos of the estate, and most damaging of all, documents that appeared to show financial irregularities in Manning Construction's accounts. The FBI raided Manning Construction offices this morning, seizing computers and financial records. Investors who lost millions when the company suddenly closed last year are calling for criminal charges. "This is impossible," I whispered. "I closed the company voluntarily. I retired. There was no fraud." But even as I said it, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed began falling into place. My business partner, Marcus Webb, had been handling more and more of the financial operations in the final years. He'd insisted on updating our accounting systems, consolidating bank accounts, streamlining processes. He'd made it all sound like modernization. Sarah appeared with Emma in her arms. "Robert, what's happening?" The news report continued. Marcus Webb, Manning's former business partner, contacted authorities last month with evidence that Manning had been systematically embezzling funds from construction projects to finance personal investments. Webb claims he discovered the fraud only after Manning abruptly closed the company and disappeared with millions in client money. I sank into one of the leather chairs, my legs no longer able to support me. Marcus was claiming that I was the criminal. Marcus, who had access to every account, every contract, every financial transaction for the past 5 years. My phone exploded with calls. Reporters, former clients, attorneys, investigators. Within an hour, the estate's front gates were surrounded by news vans and photographers. Dad, Daniel said, kneeling beside my chair. Talk to me. What is this about? I looked at my son, my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter, and realized that everything I'd built over the past 2 years was about to crumble. The family I'd fought so hard to rebuild was about to be destroyed by accusations I didn't understand. Daniel, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I did not steal money from anyone. I closed Manning Construction because I wanted to retire and spend time with family. Every penny I used to buy this estate came from legitimate business profits and investments I'd made over 40 years. Then why is this Marcus person saying otherwise? That was the question that terrified me. Marcus Webb had been my partner for 15 years. We built the company together, shared profits, made decisions jointly. If anyone could frame me convincingly, it would be someone who knew every detail of our business operations. My attorney William Drake arrived within 2 hours, looking grim. Robert, we need to talk privately. The FBI wants to interview you tomorrow morning, and the state attorney's office is considering filing charges. William, I didn't do anything wrong. I believe you, but someone has constructed a very convincing case that you did. We need to figure out how and why. Over the next 3 hours, William walked me through the allegations. According to the FBI, Manning Construction had been systematically overcharging clients, skimming money from project budgets, and hiding funds in offshore accounts. The evidence included forged documents with my signature, bank transfers that appeared to come from my personal accounts, and emails that seemed to show me directing Marcus to conceal financial irregularities. Robert, either you're the most sophisticated criminal I've ever met, or someone has spent years setting you up to take the fall for their crimes. It has to be Marcus. He's the only one who could have created this kind of evidence. But why? What would he gain by destroying you? That's when the second shoe dropped. William's phone rang, and after a brief conversation, he turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Robert, Marcus Webb filed for personal bankruptcy last month. He lost everything in a series of bad investments and gambling debts. But according to the records, he recently came into a substantial sum of money, enough to pay off his debts and start over. How much money? $12 million. The exact amount I'd paid for Grandview Manor. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't just stolen from our company. He'd used the evidence of his own crimes to frame me, then collected a reward from the FBI for exposing the fraud. He'd probably been planning this for years, creating false evidence, manipulating records, and positioning himself as the innocent partner who discovered his colleague's criminal behavior. William, we need to prove that Marcus is lying. That's going to be very difficult. He's already cooperating with federal investigators, and whistleblowers are given significant credibility in these cases. What does this mean for the estate? William's expression grew even more serious. If you're charged with financial crimes, the government can seize assets they believe were purchased with stolen money. Robert, they could take Grandview Manor. I thought about Catherine and Thomas and Maria and all the staff who had come to depend on this place for their livelihoods. I thought about the community events we'd hosted, the celebrations we'd planned, the families whose lives had been touched by our work here. They can't take the estate. Too many people depend on it. Robert, if the government believes you bought this property with embezzled funds, they can and will seize it. Asset forfeiture laws are very broad. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with the estate staff. They deserved to know what was happening before they heard it on the news or lost their jobs without warning. We gathered in the library where I'd first shared my vision for transforming Grandview Manor into something more than a luxury event venue. Now I had to tell them that vision might be ending. I need to be honest with you about something that's going to affect all of us. I began. I'm being investigated by the FBI on charges related to my former construction company. The accusations are false, but the investigation could result in the seizure of this property. The room was completely silent. Catherine looked like she might be sick. What does that mean for us? Thomas asked. It means that your jobs, this business, everything we've built together might be in jeopardy. Maria raised her hand. Mr. Manning, do you need us to testify that you're a good person? Because we will. All of us. Maria, this isn't about character. This is about financial crimes that someone else committed but attributed to me. Then we fight it, said James, the groundskeeper. You didn't give up on us when the previous owners couldn't pay our salaries. We don't give up on you when someone tries to destroy your reputation. Over the next hour, something extraordinary happened. Instead of panicking about their job security, the staff began organizing a defense of my character. Catherine offered to compile records of every community event we'd hosted. Thomas volunteered to document all the charitable work we'd done. Jennifer said she would contact every family we'd helped celebrate and ask them to write letters supporting my integrity. Mr. Manning, Catherine said, you've shown us what it looks like when someone uses their resources to lift other people up instead of tearing them down. We know who you are, and we're going to make sure everyone else knows too. As the meeting concluded, I realized that the family I'd accidentally created at Grandview Manor was going to fight for me the same way I'd fought for them. It was humbling and inspiring and terrifying all at once, but I also knew that character witnesses wouldn't be enough to overcome sophisticated financial fraud allegations. I needed evidence, and I needed it fast. The next morning, I met with FBI Special Agent Patricia Rodriguez at the federal building downtown. William accompanied me, but I could tell he was deeply concerned about the strength of the case against me. Agent Rodriguez was professional but clearly convinced of my guilt. She laid out documents, bank records, and email communications that painted a picture of systematic embezzlement spanning nearly a decade. Mr. Manning, we have evidence that you diverted over $15 million from client accounts into personal investments. The Grandview Manor purchase is just the most recent example. Agent Rodriguez, I've never seen most of these documents before. These bank transfers didn't come from my accounts. These emails weren't written by me. Sir, we have handwriting experts who verified your signature on multiple documents. We have digital forensics showing these emails originated from your company computer. We have bank records showing transfers from accounts in your name. I studied the documents she showed me. The signatures looked like mine. The email addresses appeared correct. The bank account numbers matched accounts I'd used for years. If I didn't know I was innocent, I'd be convinced of my guilt too. Agent Rodriguez, I need to ask you something. How long has Marcus Webb been cooperating with your investigation? Mr. Webb contacted us 14 months ago with initial concerns about financial irregularities. He's been providing evidence and testimony ever since. 14 months. That meant Marcus had been planning this frame-up for over a year, carefully building a case while pretending to be my trusted business partner. Did Mr. Webb provide most of this evidence? Mr. Webb provided crucial documentation and testimony, yes, but we've corroborated his claims through independent investigation. What if I told you that Mr. Webb had access to every account, every document, and every computer system you're using as evidence against me? Agent Rodriguez's expression didn't change. Are you suggesting that your business partner of 15 years has fabricated evidence against you? I'm suggesting that the person with the most access to create false evidence is the person who's been helping you build your case. Mr. Manning, that's a very serious accusation. It's also the truth. The interview lasted 4 hours. By the end, I could tell that Agent Rodriguez remained convinced of my guilt, but William thought we'd planted enough doubt to slow down the prosecution. Robert, he said as we left the federal building, we need to hire a forensic accountant and a digital forensics expert. If Marcus fabricated this evidence, there will be traces of manipulation that experts can find. How long will that take? Months. Maybe longer. We don't have months, William. The government is moving to seize the estate next week. That afternoon, I returned to Grandview Manor to find something that stopped me in my tracks. The front lawn was covered with people, hundreds of them, holding signs and banners. Robert Manning is innocent. Don't destroy our community center. Grandview Manor helps families. Catherine ran to meet me as I got out of my car. Mr. Manning, it started this morning with just a few people. Then the families from all our community events began arriving. Then the local news picked it up, and now, I looked at the crowd more closely. There was Mrs. Johnson, whose husband's retirement party we'd hosted. There was the Martinez family, whose daughter's quinceañera we'd celebrated for free. There were teachers, firefighters, police officers, and dozens of other people whose lives had been touched by our work at the estate. A reporter approached me with a microphone. "Mr. Manning, how do you respond to the federal charges against you?" I respond by saying that the truth will come out, and in the meantime I'm grateful to be surrounded by people who know my character. What will happen to Grandview Manor if the government seizes it? I looked at the crowd of supporters, at the staff who had become family, at the estate that had transformed from a symbol of exclusion into a beacon of community inclusion. Grandview Manor belongs to this community now. It's bigger than any one person, including me. That evening, Daniel and Sarah came to the estate for what might be our last family dinner in the library. "Dad, I need you to know something," Daniel said. "No matter what happens with this investigation, Sarah and I believe in your innocence completely." "Thank you, son. That means everything to me. Dad, we've been talking. If the government seizes the estate, we want to help fight to get it back. Daniel, you can't risk your careers and your future for this." Sarah spoke up. "Robert, you taught us that family fights for each other. This is us fighting for you." As we talked late into the night, I realized that the crisis threatening to destroy everything I'd built was also revealing the strength of what we'd created together. The staff who refused to abandon ship, the community that rallied to our defense, the family relationships that had been tested and proven genuine. But I also knew that love and loyalty wouldn't be enough to overcome sophisticated fraud allegations. I needed a miracle, or I needed to outsmart someone who had spent years planning my destruction. The next morning brought both. Catherine burst into my bedroom at 6 a.m., still in her robe and clearly agitated. "Mr. Manning, you need to see this. Now." She handed me her phone, which was displaying a social media post from someone named David Chen. I worked as an IT consultant for Manning Construction from 2018 to 2021. I installed and maintained their computer systems. Marcus Webb asked me to create several fake email accounts and backdate documents in 2022, claiming it was for tax purposes. He paid me $50,000 cash to keep quiet about it. After seeing the news about Mr. Manning being accused of fraud, I can't stay silent anymore. The evidence against Robert Manning was manufactured by Marcus Webb. My hands were shaking as I read the post. This was the proof we needed. "Catherine, have you called William Drake?" "I called him before I came to wake you up. He's on his way here with a federal prosecutor." Within 2 hours, my library was filled with FBI agents, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and a very nervous IT consultant who was ready to testify that Marcus Webb had paid him to create false evidence against me. David Chen was a soft-spoken man in his 30s, who looked terrified to be in a room full of federal agents, but his story was detailed, consistent, and supported by documentation he'd kept despite Marcus's instructions to destroy everything. "Mr. Webb contacted me in early 2022, Chen explained. He said Mr. Manning was planning to retire and they needed to clean up some financial records for tax purposes. He asked me to create email accounts that looked like they belonged to Mr. Manning and to backdate some documents to make it look like financial transactions had happened earlier than they actually did." Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. "Why didn't you report this to authorities?" "Because Mr. Webb told me it was routine business practice, and he paid me more money than I'd ever seen. I'm not proud of it, but I needed the money for my daughter's medical bills." "What changed your mind?" Chen looked directly at me. "I saw Mr. Manning on the news, and I saw all those people supporting him. I realized that someone was using my work to destroy an innocent person's life." Over the next 4 hours, Chen walked investigators through the process Marcus had used to create false evidence: forged emails with backdated timestamps, manipulated bank records that made legitimate transactions look suspicious, even fake security footage that appeared to show me accessing accounts I'd never touched. It was very sophisticated, Chen admitted. Mr. Webb knew exactly what kind of evidence would be most damaging, and he paid me to create it perfectly. By evening, the entire case against me was collapsing. Marcus Webb was arrested at his home in Florida. where he'd been living under a false name with the $12 million he'd received for providing false testimony to federal authorities. Agent Rodriguez called me personally to apologize. "Miss Manning, I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've never seen such an elaborate frame-up. Marcus Webb spent 2 years and significant resources creating false evidence against you. If Miss Chen hadn't come forward, you might have been convicted of crimes you didn't commit." "Agent Rodriguez, what happens now?" "All charges against you are being dropped immediately, your assets will be unfrozen, and the government will issue a formal apology. Marcus Webb will face federal charges for fraud, perjury, and conspiracy." That evening I stood on the front steps of Grandview Manor looking out at the crowd of supporters who had refused to leave until they knew I was safe. Catherine stood beside me with a microphone connected to a portable speaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying across the lawn, "I want to thank you for believing in me when the evidence suggested you shouldn't. You saw past the accusations to the person you knew I was, and that faith literally saved my life." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. "But more importantly, you've shown me something I never fully understood before. Grandview Manor doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to every family we've celebrated, every community member we've supported, every person who has found joy and connection within these walls." I paused, looking at Daniel and Sarah, who were standing in the front row with Emma in Sarah's arms. This estate taught me that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about people who choose to show up for each other, especially when showing up is difficult or risky. Today all of you showed up for me. Tomorrow I promise to keep showing up for you. As the crowd began to disperse, sharing hugs and making plans for future celebrations, I realized that Marcus Webb's attempt to destroy me had actually accomplished the opposite. It had revealed the true strength of the community we'd built and the genuine bonds we'd formed. 6 months later, Grandview Manor hosted its largest event ever, a community festival celebrating the power of standing together in the face of adversity. Marcus Webb was serving a 15-year federal sentence for fraud and conspiracy. The estate had received national attention as a model for community-supported business, and we had a waiting list of organizations wanting to partner with us. But the most important change was personal. Daniel and Sarah announced that they were expecting their second child, and they asked if I would consider moving into one of the guest cottages on the estate property. "Dad, we want Emma and the new baby to grow up knowing their grandfather every day, not just during monthly dinners." "Are you sure? I don't want to interfere with your family life." Sarah laughed. "Robert, you are our family life. Besides, someone needs to help you run this place, and Daniel's always been good with numbers." As I watched Emma toddle through the gardens where her parents had once posed for wedding photos, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all to this point. A wedding invitation that never came had led to a purchase that changed everything. False accusations had revealed true friendships. And a family that had been broken by exclusion had been rebuilt through radical inclusion. The estate that I'd bought in hurt and anger had become a place of healing, not just for me but for hundreds of families who had found celebration and community within its walls. One evening, as Daniel and I walked through the gardens after dinner, he asked me a question that brought everything full circle. "Dad, do you ever regret buying this place? I mean, if we just invited you to the wedding in the first place, none of this would have happened." I thought about it for a moment, watching Sarah and Emma feeding ducks by the small pond. "Daniel, if you had invited me to your wedding, I would have attended as a guest. I would have been proud and happy, but I would have remained essentially unchanged. Buying this estate forced me to confront who I wanted to be, not just as your father but as a member of a larger human family. And who did you want to be? Someone who uses his resources to create inclusion instead of division. Someone who understands that the best way to heal from rejection is to make sure other people feel welcomed and valued." Daniel smiled. "So you're saying that getting excluded from my wedding was the best thing that ever happened to you?" "I'm saying that what you meant as exclusion became the foundation for the most inclusive thing I've ever done." As we walked back toward the house, I could see lights glowing in windows throughout the estate. The main house where Daniel and Sarah lived with Emma, the guest cottage where I'd made my home, the staff quarters where Catherine and Thomas and Maria had comfortable apartments, the event spaces where tomorrow we'd host a celebration for military veterans returning from overseas. Grandview Manor had become exactly what I'd envisioned 2 years ago. A place where people who had been overlooked, undervalued, or forgotten could experience the joy of being truly celebrated. But more than that, it had become proof that the most powerful response to exclusion isn't revenge, it's radical inclusion. It's opening your doors wider, your heart bigger, and your definition of family broader than anyone expects. The wedding invitation that never came had led to the most important invitation I'd ever extended. An invitation for everyone to belong somewhere, to matter to someone, and to be celebrated for exactly who they are. As I tucked Emma into her crib that night, she looked up at me with Daniel's eyes and Sarah's smile and whispered, "Granddaddy." In that moment, I knew that everything, the hurt, the anger, the betrayal, the accusations, the fear, had been worth it for the family we'd built together and the community we'd created for others. The estate that began as a symbol of my exclusion had become a testament to the power of choosing love over resentment, inclusion over isolation, and hope over hurt. And every day, as I watched families celebrate their most important moments in the same rooms where I'd once sat alone and forgotten, I was reminded that the best endings are actually beginnings in disguise.